I know this much, that anybody who thinks that their job is not going to get affected, or their current workflow of doing things is not going to affect it, I think they are just naive. The method of teaching is archaic, right? It's just the same thing that we've been doing the rote learning system for 15 years, right? Such a simple problem as well. In India, I don't think too many people would think twice for uploading their own photograph to view the cloth on their model. Whereas in US, this was a big consideration. In our own system, I think it's pretty funny that everybody thinks they should be in the LLM race.
Today, we have with us the founder of 123 of AI, who's helping 100,000 working professionals to upskill in machine learning roles through his work. He is a podcaster himself, and I would say a research wizard, skilled from Stanford and IIIT Hyderabad. Today, we have with us Abbhinav Venkat. I welcome you to the AI Bros show. How is it going at your end?
Thanks, Kev. Quite an introduction there. So the idea is we aspire to kind of help 100,000 people. We're not yet there, but that's sort of the aspiration. But yeah, I'm doing well, and glad to kind of be over here, and take this conversation forward. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. So, to begin with, could you tell us what 123 of AI is all about and how the idea originally came to you?
Sure. So, 123 FAI is an EdTech brand, and we are in the space of helping busy professionals upskill. So, I'm sure with your day-to-day jobs, you guys also probably don't have as much time on your hands, and in case you kind of have to, and AI is everywhere, right? And everybody has to kind of um, learn on the job. So that's where we kind of come in, and all of our content, all of our method of delivery is focused on people who are really, really busy. And we have something internally that we have developed called as the curiosity driven effective learning system. So it's a bunch of tools, and we have built a platform around that. So it's a bunch of tools which helps in better retention, sharper problem solving, and we kind of step away from the traditional method of using theoretical, mathematically heavy lectures to other kinds of things like case studies and experiential learning and things like that, to ensure that people can really pick up these skills much faster, more effectively, and and have a faster impact in a probably shorter time, right? So that's the kind of that's how we do it, and we kind of do it through a bunch of these the courses, and we have a product called as Q&A lab, which is more so around interview preparation, but the thesis remains the same everywhere, where it's we kind of go with this whole ecosystem of curiosity driven learning. Yeah, so that's 123 of AI, and it started about a year and a half back. And I think you asked how we kind of thought about coming into the space. So prior to that, I was basically a part of a couple of Silicon Valley startups, again, in the capacity of a AI scientist. And I think it was at that point that ChatGPT had just launched, 2021-22, where things were kind of heating up, and so if for depends on your on your viewers, but largely I would say the AI space maybe prior to 21-22 was di- broadly divided into, I'd say, computer vision and NLP. So computer vision is where you work with images and things like that. um, and NLP is where you work with language, right? And there was a lot more, I'd say, work happening around the computer vision. That's where I was, right? So all of us thought that CV would be what would kind of be the next big thing. But it so happened that in the domain of NLP, ChatGPT was launched, and so that kind of piqued my curiosity, and I've sort of started taking a look at what's happening in this space, and I realized that I myself, despite having spent 7 8 years in the space, find it quite overwhelming, right? And plus, at that point in time, I was of course working, trying to upskill my own self, and I saw that suddenly the needs in our company were evolving really fast, right? So that's where I thought that and there also came a point where I thought that the work I was doing at that point, it was also another startup based out of California. So the work I was doing there was shifting a lot, kind of more a little bit on the hiring side, marketing, and things like that as well. So I thought that I might as well do it for myself in combination with all these things going on in the space. I thought it's a pretty interesting problem to hit. Yeah, so that's kind of
Okay.
how the journey started.
All right.
Nice, nice. So, you talked about curiosity-driven education system, which you have kind of created at 123 of AI. But
Yeah,
if you understand, like today we have an open education system where people are learning from YouTube or
correct.
even AI-driven learning. So, how it is different from
Yeah.
those type of learning, and how it provides value to the individuals?
Yeah, so I think if you look at broad classes of things which are in the market right now, so obviously you have YouTube on one side, but in YouTube, obviously, there's a lot of like fantastic creators who put in a lot of value, a lot of effort, amazing stuff, right? But probably one fundamental issue on YouTube is that sometimes the content is not as structured. Number one, number two, even if it is structured, probably the people who are viewing don't have support, and it's not personalized for them, right? So somebody who's a fresher versus somebody with 5 years of experience and 10 years of experience, everybody doing the same content doesn't really make sense for them. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
has strong mathematical skills, somebody has strong skills in Python, somebody has strong skills in something else, right? So kind of the diversity which is there, it's a one size fits all solution if you look at YouTube, right? And I kind of say that that applies to also, let's say, Udemy and many of those courses,
Mm-hmm.
the MOOC ecosystem which is there. And so those are, I think, two critical points where everybody kind of learns differently, and all of that existing learning we believe is quite theory heavy, right? So kind of playing on these two three points, which is providing people with more amount of support. And even if you look at I'm kind of digressing across, switching across three to four different points here, but even if you look at let's say the courses of other established edtech players, right? So somebody
Mm-hmm.
like a Scalar or somebody or any of these sorts of players, their completion rates are around 5%, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there is clearly, despite you look at each of these problems, let's say somebody is providing structured content and providing support, right? Yet people are still completing only 5% of the programs, right? So what is kind of lacking there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we kind of figured out that the length of these programs are really large, the method of teaching is archaic, right? It's just the same thing that we've been doing the rote learning system for 15 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's perhaps not the best way to do it. So then we decided, okay, let's kind of go back and see how can we design our curriculum. So we have what you call as a Pareto inspired curriculum. So it's sort of the power law 80-20 rule, where we say that not everything is really important for you,
Yep.
right? So we pick basis our expertise exactly what's kind of required, and drive in these other elements which help in superior problem solving. So that would be we, for example, use a case study. So uh, just to give you an example, right? Let's say there are you use like a classical problem of regression in machine learning, and a normal any other ecosystem would teach that through, here's the mathematical derivation, right? Here's a set of equations and so on. So we say, okay, that's valid, that's important to know, but here's also a case study that thinks about it in a more holistic sense from a design point of view, right? And through that case study you learn like 10 other principles which spans across two three different concepts as well. So what that allows you to do is it saves a lot of time, and you really remember stories. I think all of us relate to stories far better than simple math, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you remember stories far better, you're able to think more critically about design, right? And so we tie in these sorts of elements in to ensure that people kind of learn more efficiently. And in addition to that, also, we have this community support system. We kind of do this, run each program on a cohort basis. So there's a select bunch of 30 40 odd people for whom they run together. So, and it's kind of quite diverse groups, network with each other, keep each other's motivated. A lot of gamified elements also are part of our programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have like leaderboards and daily streaks, and a lot of very interesting things inspired from a lot of other players in different domains, right? So Duolingo does something very interesting when it comes to gamification. So taking inspiration from all of that. And so a combination of all of these different elements, we've kind of put that into a single space. And I would say that if the core issue was, say, motivation and completion rates and things like that, we have done pretty well in terms of addressing that, where we are probably 4 to 5x better than the industry standard, right? But again, it's I think a growing continuous effort to refine that and then see how we can add more value to the learner, right? Because clearly all of us are very busy, and to spend time apart from that to kind of learn, it's quite a challenge. So that's kind of how we have thought about it, and we're going about it. Fingers crossed. as we scale, it continues to work out. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we also see that you have been working with educators from Ivy League institutions and leading AI startups. So the question here is like how the team collaborates internally to deliver
Hmm.
such a high quality content. Means you have been working with different institutions and startups. So how that collaboration works?
So I would say to a large extent right now, 90 to 95% of the content is actually delivered by me.
Mm-hmm.
But the way we kind of work around it is we have a lot of people who come in for say guest lectures or specific use cases that they're really great at, right?
Okay.
And they come in either in two forms: one either as a mentor, in which they are a constant part, and the learners see them week on week. So that's one way in which they come on. Or the second way is they just come in to give one single session as a guest lecture, right? So these are typically two ways, and depending on the demographic of the batch, we kind of try to see who's a good fit, either as a guest lecturer or as a mentor, right? And mentors typically is, I think, a common pool of my own network, who kind of stay with us. Whereas the guest lecturers, I think we kind of reach out, seeing so say for example, in a particular batch, if there are more people who are coming from a finance background, so they'll be looking at more use cases along those lines. So we'll try to see, can we get somebody from, let's say, Goldman Sachs, or I don't want to name any brands here, but basically anybody from, say, investment banking, or anybody from the financial world, to give some kind of idea on how they deal with building machine learning systems, right? So we kind of work about it that way. But I'd say the base content in terms of the programs is delivered just by me, and then the support and, I'd say, the industry collaborations kind of is where we try to see who kind of does what. I hope that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Answer.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So, like, I wanted to ask one thing that, as you said, that you introduced the concept of gamification into 123 of AI while you teach machine learning
Yeah.
and, provide learning and education to people into that area. Uh, are the experienced ones, the ones who holds experience, are they able to resonate with that method, or they still demand for that traditional learning method? How does that work? Like, are they able to
Yeah.
resonate with it?
Yeah. So I think, interestingly, it's perhaps it's perhaps them. Those are the kinds of people who perhaps find it the most useful. The reason
Mm-hmm.
being that they're just used to things in a certain way, and because probably I think the modern generation, people who are like freshers and so on. See, although we kind of advertise and say that, hey, we are looking at busy professionals, there is a demographic which is a young demographic of freshers, and those kinds of students also who come to us, right? And so we are able to kind of draw these parallels, and it is the people who are 5 plus years, 15 plus years of experience, who really find high value in this. I'd say it's difficult for me to yet draw enough conclusion on the younger audience, on freshers and so on, but they are the ones who enjoy it a bit more, adding more energy, right? Because they have 10 things going on in their life,
Right.
right? From kids to spouses to whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
it gets very challenging over there. So yeah, I'd say that's a broad conclusion, big plus that we have seen. Yeah.
Hmm. Because usually the experienced ones, they find many of such things gimmicky, and they prefer the traditional method. So that's why I think thought to ask the question.
So it could also be the fact that a lot of these experienced people. So,
Hmm.
for example, when you start the program, we typically start them out with some prerequisites around, say, some basic mathematical concepts and some basic coding principles and so on, right? Like teaching them a little bit on Python and things like that. So, when it particularly comes to maths, right? These people have probably done math 10, 15 years back.
Correct.
So, many of them are often haunted by the fact that they have to go and learn that kind of mathematics, and there's a little bit of calculus involved and things like that. So perhaps that's where, if you kind of hold their hands and show them an easier way, I think maybe those ghosts of the past don't haunt them as much.
Right, right,
Mm-hmm.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's say I am one of the listeners of this podcast, and
Mm.
let's say I genuinely need the mentorship and the course materials of 123 of AI, but I
Mm.
am not aware about it. So,
Yeah.
like, how can someone determine if they are a very good fit or if they would really benefit out of the mentorship of 123 of AI? How
Yeah,
should
I
they
think
get?
I'd say, yeah, fair enough. So, something that we have done to some extent, and I'd like to do more, is probably put out, testimonials of like past students, kind of just showcase the demographic of people who are coming in over here, right? So everybody will be able to relate to some profile. So
Mm-hmm.
someone might be coming from data background and might be an engineering manager, right? Somebody else might be a software developer, somebody might be a data analyst. So we have kind of had people across the spectrum. So probably the best way is to reach out to some of these people. And typically, one of the our core values is transparency. Whether it is so, even if you look at our homepage, right, we say that our students are affiliated with such and such companies, and we put an asterisk saying that, hey, these are self declarations by our students, right? So it starts from right our homepage where we say that we're as transparent as we can be. So here, in fact, we put in our details of our students, saying that I shouldn't call them students because several of them are really experienced. I'd say learners, right? So we put in all these details: where do they work, who are they, and the testimonials out there. So feel free to reach out to them to have a quick conversation. I think every student who has successfully completed our program, I'm sure they are. I'm 100% confident they'll be happy to help you out
Mm-hmm.
in kind of understanding better. Something that we perhaps should do more, which are not done enough, is put out a lot more content in terms of our actual teaching material and things like that. But it's kind of a growing process, and hopefully you'll see more of our content out there on YouTube and things like that pretty soon. So yeah, you can check that out as well. Uh, Also, probably another thing, an easy entry into the ecosystem, is we hold a lot of these weekend workshops. So
All right.
they are sort of like these 4 hour 5 hour kind of workshops for different kind of levels, right? So there's one for somebody who absolutely knows nothing. There's one for somebody who has some idea about say classical machine learning, traditional machine learning, things like that. So it depends on where you kind of stand. There are these different workshops, so they are great places to come and check out how is it that we teach, for example. And Right, just understand the entire ecosystem. Those are probably like great tasters for people to check out. Yeah, so I'd say these couple of
Mm-hmm.
ways: talk to all students, come check out our workshops, right? Because some of them end up being free. If you follow us on LinkedIn, we put out a lot of stuff for free there. So you can kind of come and check out these workshops for free, or hopefully in the future you'll see a lot more from us on YouTube.
Definitely.
Okay, so I just wanted to extend this question, which Gav gave. Wanted to understand by an example of an audience. Let's say I am the person who wants to. Let's take my example here. If I
Yeah,
have around 15, 16 years of experience in big data,
yeah,
and I am someone who wants to now get into the AI space,
right.
people like me or maybe myself.
Yeah.
So what is the offering for these type of professionals? How they can start into the AI
Mhm.
or generative AI
So
space?
sure. So I think the main follow up question I'd have is, in what capacity are you interested in being involved? So it would be
Hmm.
either are you looking at entering into a core AI engineering sort of a role where you develop AI systems, right? Or are you kind of interested? So there are kind of two or three kinds of roles that you can get into in this entire
Hmm.
ecosystem. So one would be an AI engineering role, which I would say is largely, say, if you're coming from a software background, for example, it's easy to enter into an AI engineering role where you're not necessarily using or building foundational models from scratch. You're leveraging a lot of stuff which is built by others, so through APIs and things like that,
Hmm.
right? But you understand the entire development ecosystem, so it's still kind of very easy for you to tweak things based on your specific business use case. So that's what happens in a lot of AI engineering roles, from what I've seen. So that's one sort of a use case. So if you're coming from software background, that's a good fit. Then for anybody who's coming from a data background, typically I think data science roles nowadays are
Hmm.
evolving to include a significant amount of machine learning development as well. So that's another sort of a second use case that you can look into. But each of these roles has certain parts to it which are very specific. And so, for example, data science would involve a little bit more of dashboarding, a little bit more of what we call as EDA, which is basically just playing around the data and figuring out what the data is saying. So there's certain other elements as well, but machine learning is kind of being added into that. Probably the third kind of roles would be sort of these AI research roles, if somebody is interested in that kind of work, which are probably the hardest to enter into, because you will need some existing pedigree with respect to some publications and things like that to enter into those roles. That's not a area that we particularly cater to, helping people publish work and things like that, because research, as you might be aware, might take a couple of years as well, and it's kind of an open-ended thing, right? So these are the kind of three, I'd say, large roles, as a person who's a independent contractor, as a person who's developing, right? Then comes on the management side of things. You could either be somebody who's a product manager, who's now becoming, so it's becoming popular to have an AI product manager now. So that's another thing which you can enter into, or you could enter into um, an engineering manager role itself, but in the AI space, right? So they're also having an understanding of the ecosystem of tools is very of processes rather, is very critical. So it depends on where you are and where you want to enter into. You will probably fall into one of these buckets, right? So that's kind of where we will help you out, saying that, okay, if you're falling into one of these buckets and you're able to see an aspirational role for yourself amongst whatever this ecosystem is, then we can take you through a structured path, which is almost a common prerequisite for every role. And then kind of like maybe tweak it and say, hey, maybe you don't need this, you need a little bit more of that, for example. So we would enforce that through, let's say, the project you're developing, right? So if you're looking for a more senior position, such as yourself, 16, 17 years of experience, you're probably going to be entering as a AI engineering manager, that sort of a role. If the management side of things is what interests you, right? So in that case, we'll say, okay, focus more on design, right? Focus more on design, focus more on sort of high level things around, say, even business requirements, right? Not just on the on the development side, but the entire ecosystem around. You also focus on deploying these models, understand what are the inference times, what's the baseline hardware on which these things run, right? And feed that back into your requirements to tweak your models to do that, right? So it kind of personalize that on the project level. So that's one place where we kind of say that, okay, these are the other things that you personally, if you fit into this kind of a category, you should probably focus on, these are the small principles. But largely that's how we kind of map it. So where you currently stand to where you want to go, and then pass everybody through a common baseline of things that they really want to do, things that everybody has to know, and then personalize it at the project level, at the hackathon level, at an individual feedback level. Oftentimes they'll submit things on through GitHub and so on to us, through our our assignments and what we call as experiential units. We have set them in our program. So they'll kind of send all of that to us, and that's where we'll say, hey, this is great, but if you're looking for a, let's say, a finance role in certain place, or you're looking at something else, these are certain other things based on our understanding that you should add. So that is where, in terms of feedback, we can kind of help people out. But it is still not at a scale where it is completely automated, and that's our effort, right? We're trying to build this platform through Q&A lab, where eventually our courses also sit on that, and it kind of gets towards personalization at scale. So that's the more larger vision. But right now it's a bit more, I would say, feedback on a one to many basis. Yeah, I hope
Okay,
that
that
makes
clarify.
sense.
Yeah, that clarifies a lot of things for myself also, and for the others who are listening. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, that is actually a very great explanation and in-depth explanation of what was asked. So I'm more interested in your journey. Actually, I want to know. I want to ask something related to your journey. So
Sure.
you were a graduate research assistant at IIIT Hyderabad. Then
Hmm.
you went to Stanford, right? You
Yeah.
were a visiting scientist over there, and you have also worked at Sunmall and Aplara, as
Yeah.
I've explored. So, and now you are the founder of 123 of AI. So I want you to pick some key lessons from each
Hmm.
of these stages of your career and tell our audience,
Okay.
tell us those key lessons.
Right. So I think maybe I'll put a disclaimer up here, up in front, that so these are obviously my personal takeaways, and uh, I'm sure there are amongst your viewers, and you guys yourself are really experienced in your own different ways. So this is, I think, just specific to what I have personally been through. So I don't want anybody to kind of think of this as preaching or gyan in any way, right? So disclaimer before I kind of get started. Probably I'll maybe start with the right at the very beginning, right? So joined my bachelor's in IIIT Hyderabad, BTech,
Hmm.
and the usually what ends up happening there is in your second or third year, if you're also enrolled for the dual degree program like I was,
Mm-hmm.
you have compulsorily required to do research, right? And
Right.
research, the IIIT Hyderabad model, which is there, and I'm a huge proponent of our university because of the style of research that they do, which is more in line with the US system. So whether you're a master's student or a PhD student, it is a must that you publish peer reviewed work in A star conferences, which is the highest cadre of conferences, right? And
Mm-hmm.
depending on whether you're a master student or a PhD student, the requirements change, whether you have one paper or two papers or so on, right? So right in your third year is where that journey starts. And that's where you, like you mentioned, right, graduate research assistant, that kind of starts over there. And then once you're done with your BTech and then the end of your fourth year, you full-time work on your thesis. And hopefully by the time you're in your fourth or fifth year, you have narrowed in on the exact problem that you want to work on, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just some context over there for people. So I'd say from that kind of journey, the research part was something that I did not estimate would be as tough as it ended up being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when I entered the program, I did not have an idea what research meant, to be very honest, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when you kind of got into it, then I think it became far more clearer on how challenging it is to actually innovate and propose something which is very novel, very new, and which actually adds value to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
uh, Probably my top takeaway from that time, it's difficult to like synthesize one single thing, but for anybody who's been through this research journey in any form, not just necessarily in AI or computer science, they will relate to it that it's a very challenging journey. So keep going, right? And I think it's a general thing that's there in life as well. So the results might not come, right? But you kind of keep just working on it, step by step, as logically as you can. And if you reason about it, eventually something will work out, right? And in that process, you learn a lot of things. Now, specifically for people who are looking at the world of AI research, who maybe are aspiring to enter into that space, it can be very overwhelming to start out with. So my one takeaway to them would be that you can focus on any pick any problem of interest to you. um, and uh, look at the latest papers, right? Correlate what are every paper will talk about, certain things that they'd like to do in the future or certain things that they're weak on, right? So use that as a starting point to figure out, is that a big enough white space for you to attack, right? Do you have enough skill set? Or something which I learned at the later end of my journey was that it is better to operate in complete white spaces. Create a complete subcategory or a sub problem where you define everything from the data to what the exact problem is, and you just have to prove that that problem is relevant enough for you to solve, right? So anybody in the research world looking at publishing, I'd say keep going and probably try to define a sub problem where you're the only player, so it's easy for you to dominate, right? And once you have one paper out in that space and people start noticing you, then it's very easy to get the follow-up work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I would say is from probably the world of research from my initial years. You guys can feel free to interject, or any questions you have, anything, you can feel free to kind of stop me there. Um, okay,
Yeah,
so yeah,
just one thing. You told that you should work on a separate subcategory when you are
yeah.
when you like into exploration. What about the validation part? How should someone validate if they are into the correct subcategory or something and they are not into the wrong path?
Right, right. Yeah. So largely what you're saying, and this is relevant to, the world of business as well.
Mm-hmm.
Problem solving and innovation is the same essentially. That's what one parallel which I've realized.
Right.
So figuring out, is that problem interesting, relevant enough? Are there enough takers for that solution and for that problem? That's something you figure out in business. That's something you figure out in research as well. So, but in the world of research, especially graduate level research, you do have advisors who have far more experience, who perhaps have 15 years of experience, have a PhD, have been publishing papers all their life, and they will be the right people. Hopefully, you find a decent advisor, or at least you can talk to people in that ecosystem, right? So, or the beauty about the research world is you can find anybody's email address, send out an email to them, say this is what I'm working
Right.
on, what are your thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, So people are usually open to help. So I think that's the best way. If you have an advisor, then in the world ecosystem of research, it's great. They'll give you inputs to kind of say, are you working the right direction? Is it an important enough problem, right?
Hmm.
And the second way is reach out to other people who are maybe solving related problems. So you must have derived this problem from some larger problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can always reach out to people who are solving that problem and ask them, hey, what do you think about this, right? And I think it's very naive today that we think ideas get stolen. We should be open to sharing ideas. The entire research world, the entire developer community, also so much of open source work that happens. We should be
Yeah.
completely open
Correct.
to sharing these ideas, right? Because
Hmm.
execution is really key. Ideas, every second person on the street has an idea, right? And the more you share, the more you get feedback, the more you understand these are the things you can improve. So I'd say, yeah, in terms of validation, probably those are things that you can do. um, so no matter which part of the world you're in, what ecosystem you're in, if there's a in this world of research, it's an advisor. In your world, it could be a more experienced mentor, a business leader, your managers, or whoever it is. So they'll probably be a good guiding light for you. And if not, try to reach out to other people. Talk to consumers of that ecosystem, that solution, that problem in the market. They will probably tell you, are they finding value in it or not. And hopefully you find
Hmm.
enough, and then you can double down and try to build more on it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So communication and networking is the key ahead, right?
Yeah, I think very critical, and more so as AI gets, I'd say, commoditized. Then this is even more critical, right? What's left is just human relations. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. Correct. Correct. The only original thing
Exactly.
I'd say.
True.
So I actually read on your LinkedIn profile that your master's degree was sponsored by Qualcomm Innovation Fellowship. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you please tell me about this? Like that actually sparked an
Right.
interest out in me. So
Sure.
please tell me about this.
Sure. So what typically happens is that whenever you kind of publish papers, in a lot of these top tier conferences, you are expected to go to the conference and present the paper, right?
Correct.
Now, most of these top tier conferences are international conferences, which happen either in the US, in Australia, New Zealand, Korea, and so on and so forth, right? So they happen kind of all over the world, in Europe and so on. So as an Indian, you really can't afford to, not just as an Indian, I think anybody around the world, putting your own cash as a student particularly, you can't really travel and do this work, right? So you need somebody to sponsor you. And oftentimes in the Indian ecosystem, Indian universities don't have that kind of cash. So this is where you kind of reach out to other companies and fellowships, and they look at your work. You tell them, hey, I have a top tier publication in this specific area. I've gotten this paper accepted. So you reach out to them and you tell them that I want to go and attend this conference. So they will come and kind of help you out, right? So those are one kinds of fellowships which exist. So a lot of fellowships from Google, from Facebook and Uber, and I don't remember if Uber still does it or not. But essentially, a lot of these companies provide these kinds of fellowships, and for them, it is essentially an academic collaboration. Although everybody thinks a lot of innovation happens in the industry, there's tremendous amount of academic collaboration, and they kind of piggyback on those ideas. So for them, it's really helpful because you're sharing your insights which are not written in the paper with them, right? And they sponsor you, and you kind of go and attend this event. So that's one kind of grants which are there, grants or fellowships essentially. The one I was a part of, which was Qualcomm's, was a little bit different, where you kind of go and pitch to them in advance, much before the paper is published, that hey, this is the thesis of problems that I'm going to work on. So this is not just you; it would be your advisor, right? Your team would kind of go and tell that these are the kinds of problems that we are going to work on, and we kind of give them a roadmap on what are the things that we're going to do in this. What is the for example, the problems that I worked on were in the domain of 3D, right? So 3D
Yeah.
human reconstruction, those are the kinds of problems. So for that, you kind of require a lot of these handheld scanners and tremendous amount of infrastructure to get the data, which is not available in the international ecosystem, and it's very very expensive, right? So
Mhm.
for example, nobody in the international ecosystem would have data on how saris are draped, how, let's say, any of the Indian clothing which has so much of layers and frills and so on are there, right? So if we have to do something and build for the Indian audience, we need our own set of data, right?
Correct.
So And those sorts of scanners are very expensive. So setups, for example, in Stanford and MIT, they cost upwards of $500,000, right? And we can't really afford that kind of stuff in India. So we obviously would go and tell these guys we need something of that kind of quality, but all the same, provide us what you can, and we'll try to adjust. So luckily, we were able to build our own system inside Triple IT in the lab itself to do a lot of this data capture, and you present all of this to the fellowship, right? When you're applying to the fellowship, there'll be competing teams, there'll be certain tracks on what they want to help sponsor and grow, what are the kind of partnerships they are looking for, and along one of those tracks, you kind of tailor it and say, this is what I want to solve, this is how I'm going to use the money that you give me to travel to these conferences, to present papers, to build the data, so on and so forth. If they like what you're presenting, they like the roadmap, if they think you're a solid team which can achieve that, then they give you the money, and then you're free to kind of execute. So that's what is Qualcomm's fellowship. They still continue to, I think, hold it. It's a very good fellowship where all the top groups from India, there are specific groups from IIT Bombay, ISC Bangalore, Triple IT Hyderabad, Triple IT Delhi. All these top groups participate. So you also get to network with the best of the best across all of them. Right. So that's basically what is Qualcomm's fellowship. So we ended up winning that specific pitching round. We got the funds. We collaborated with them for the next year and a half, and they helped us in the whole process. So I could travel to these conferences, and my co-authors could travel to these conferences, and all of that is sponsored luckily through them. So that's how that worked out.
Great, great, great. So, as a student, how can someone, get to know about these conferences and fellowship programs? What are the sources where they, release their data?
So I think it's number one critical to monitor. So first of all, I think there are some central repositories. It's been a while since I've done some research. It's close to 5 years. I don't recall the name of the website, but there is a couple of
Mm,
websites where they basically categorize the conferences by their difficulty level of getting in, by the quality of papers,
mm,
right? So
mm,
how do you judge the quality of the papers? So there's something called as a citation, where they're essentially
right.
telling you who are the other people who have also quoted this paper, right? So
Mm,
they've kind of
mm,
used it as a building block. So in that sense, so that, and if a conference has a number of high citation papers, then it comes into a particular category, and then you say these are the top tier conferences and so on. So there are these websites which basically tell you that these are all the top conferences, and these are the domains in which these conferences exist. Not every
mm,
conference is relevant for every problem. So they will tell you, for let's say 3D, there is these are the top conferences. For computer vision in general, these are the other top conferences. For NLP in general, these are the top conferences. So you can get into understanding who are the top conferences, following the work that's happening over there, and at least that will allow you to kind of know when are the deadlines for these conferences, what are the problems that they accept papers on, right? So you
right.
can then kind of target, start moving in the right direction that way. So
Mm,
that's one. On these conference pages itself, once you identify the top 3 4 conferences, so for example, computer vision, they are, and they'll continue to be CVPR, ICCV, BMVC. Right? These are the best in the world where everybody aspires to go. So you go to their websites, they will tell you,
mm,
who are the fellowships, grants that they partner with as well. So people can
mm,
figure out how do I come and get there, which is a very real problem for
mm,
developing countries and so on, to go over there, and it's quite expensive. Just for one single student to go and present, it can be upwards of 1 to 1.5 lakhs, because it's a five
mm,
7 day event, sometimes 3 day event sometimes, right? Travel costs is large, staying, everything has to be taken care of. So yeah, so you can go figure out the websites, figure out the conferences, look at their stuff. They'll tell you who are the grants and so on. And typically, all the big tech companies, they have very ingrained partnerships with
mm,
all the top universities in India, right? And the research universities in India are very limited. So if you're looking at AI research, there's a handful of universities: ISC Bangalore, Triple IT Hyderabad, little bit on Triple IT Delhi, IIT Bombay, some groups, very minimal. Um, I don't know if I'm missing out anybody, but typically I would expect that these are the top guys who do
mm,
any sort of research, right? So you can also talk to people
mm,
over here. They'll also have a lot of insight and know-how on what to look for, and so on and so forth.
mm.
I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, since you have such a great knowledge at research, and you have also got a chance to, speak at institutions like the Max Planck Institute and
I'm
ICVGIP,
your
which is
researcher.
the, yeah.
You've done your research.
Can't help with the job, right?
True,
So
true, true, true.
you have also spoken at ICVGIP, which is the Indian Conference on Computer Visions, graphics and image processing, right? So my question is that I want to, based on your experience, I want you to compare the mindset towards the AI adoption and growth in India versus in the United States. How are
Okay.
people, according to you, reacting to the growth of AI in India and in the United States, or in the other sectors that you probably know?
So, are you looking for insight from the point of view of how companies are developing things, or just the general common man?
Like the
How
general
he?
audience.
Okay, general
Uh-huh.
audience. So, I'm not very sure on particularly on either ecosystem how they're kind of looking at adopting things. All I know is that, especially now that I'm also in the AI space, trying to build a business around it.
Mm-hmm.
Every company wants to be AI enabled, whether they are a US company or an Indian company, right? And to the end consumer, whether no matter which ecosystem you're a part of, unless you're an investor, of course, but no matter which ecosystem you're a part of, they really don't care if it's AI enabled or not, as long as they are whatever they're trying to do, it kind of gets solved, right? But in the US particularly, there are sometimes some meta questions which are being asked about and talked around. Things around, let's say, ethical considerations, privacy considerations, right? So even the nature of research that happens in the US, whether it is in the industry as well, happens a lot around some of these meta questions as well. So, for example, there was OpenAI themselves had released a report about a year and a half back saying that I think on their platform, I think 3% or 5% of consumer data was actually being leaked or something like that, right? And there are a lot of very recent reports which have come out saying that these models from all the big guys, right? Whether it is your Googles or OpenAIs or all the big guys, right? Whether it's across US, China, they've all been trained on data on the internet, and not everything on the internet is what do you say? There are certain parts of the internet which is proprietary, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of data which is available on torrents. There's a lot of data which is available on um, there are these websites which end up putting books and things like that up there, which is
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
proprietary content, right?
Right. Right.
So there's a lot of stuff that's also been trained on, and there's a lot of fear in certain ecosystems in the US and certain companies which I'm aware of. I think Microsoft is doing a little bit of work on this, on how do you inject privacy into this entire ecosystem. So a lot of meta questions seem to be talked about in some of these other companies, whereas in India I think we are focusing on and I'm speaking from the point of view as a builder, right? As somebody who's trying to build something, we are focusing on how we can solve an immediate need, an immediate consumer problem, right? We're not really looking at meta questions, but I think that's okay, right? Because each country has its own different sets of problems and different things that you're trying to address and look at. As a end consumer, I don't think there is too much difference. Perhaps India, as seen in the last decade with, let's say, UPI's adoption and things like that, technologically we are far more accepting. So from that point of view, so for example, the previous company that I was a part of, right? One of the important considerations. So we are building a product called as a virtual try-on product. So where your photo would, for example, be uploaded, and our product would be integrated, let's say with say Mintra or things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and not exact. It was not integrated with Mintra exactly. It was a US based product focused on Shopify stores, right? But the idea was pretty similar, that instead of seeing the model's photograph over there, you see your photograph on different pieces of clothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, such a simple problem as well in India, I don't think too many people would think twice for uploading their own photograph to view the cloth on their model. Whereas in US, this was a big consideration in our own system. So because of which the solution that we designed had to be one which was on device. The data would not go outside the person's device, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the kinds of things where in the US there's a bit more talk around privacy, around ethics, around laws around AI, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
In general, I think the AI adoption, which is there in India, I think is really high. I think people are open to trying new tech in India quite a bit. I think every second person here has tried out, has heard about ChatGPT and things like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So according
Uh,
to
uh,
you, people in India are more adaptive to the technology, especially AI. And in the US, people are more concerned about their privacy and the ethics related to the technology.
yeah, I'm drawing a broad conclusion here, basis a
Okay.
limited sample set that I'm exposed to,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But this is what I have at least seen. Yeah.
Okay. 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 So, since you are at a point where we are talking about the Indian audience, um,
Yeah.
I guess 2 3 months back, the CEO of Perplexity AI, Arvind Srinivas, he made a
Yeah.
statement that India should build its own foundation AI models, and
Right.
those models should compete globally with the
Right.
with the other countries like USA and China. So, how
Right.
much do you agree with his vision, and where do you think is currently India standing right now?
Yeah. So India is, so there are people in India who are trying to build. So first of all, I think it's pretty funny that everybody thinks they should be in the LLM race, right? Every company and every I think it's pretty funny that everybody thinks that's the race to win. So I'm not very sure that each company investing. It's probably great for the battle of OpenAI versus, or rather Microsoft versus Google, and who's going to get a better model and things like that, and or Twitter using Grok and all of that. It's probably fun to watch, but I'm not sure that's the, because there are 100 other problems to be solved in the AI space, right? Where everybody is just focusing on a lot of money going towards one problem, right? So I think it's blown a little bit out of proportion. So that's one personal opinion I have. Beyond that, with respect to India having its own models, I will not say LLM particularly, but models suited for the Indian ecosystem, I think that's a very valid point, right? Because our language, our dialect, it changes every 10 kilometers, right? Our
Exactly.
method of dressing, our everything changes every 10 kilometers. We are such a beautiful and diverse country. So, given that premise, that nature of data, no foreign institution can kind of address to, right? And whatever is your native language, if I speak to you in that dialect, immediately, no matter which country you are currently in, you'll immediately connect with me. You and
Right.
I could be
Exactly.
in Antarctica, doesn't matter. But if we speak the same language and we say that we are from similar villages or nearby areas that we have lived in, we will connect on a different level altogether. Hmm. Right? As if we have grown
Right.
together right from the age of 5. So I think sort of looking at that in terms of personalization, and we see this in the OTT space as well, right? That we have a lot of regional content coming out, like the sort of Bhojpuri specific OTTs coming out, a lot of regional content coming out, and specific OTTs, like even in the down south, there is, I think, Sun Network has its own OTT thing. Right? So personalization is the way to go forward, and when it comes to language, we have very limited data. So it's a very challenging problem to solve for the Indian ecosystem, and a very valuable problem also, I would say. Um, so yeah, I think India should fundamentally have its own foundational models, foundational data, and everything. Competing on the global stage, I think that's a different question, right? Because that is saying that you're building for the world outside, right? Uh, I think we already have a lot of, my personal opinion is that we already have a lot of problems in the country to solve for before we start looking at things outside. Personal opinion. So I think a lot of Indian founders that I am in contact with, so I'm based out of Bangalore and in touch with a lot of Indian founders here, part of different ecosystems here. A lot of them are solving for problems in this space ecosystem. Everybody's people are somebody's leveraging AI, somebody's leveraging something else, but I think there's a lot in this ecosystem to solve for first, right? And global problems, sometimes we don't even have the context of these global problems, right? If you say privacy, right, you're trying to solve for privacy, just as an example, right? We don't have privacy in our own houses. How do you expect us to solve for a problem we do not completely understand, perhaps, right? So
Yeah.
and the implications that from a US point of view, what they mean in terms of privacy and things like that. So I'd say, yeah, competing on a global stage, I mean, it requires a lot of funds, a lot of capital, right? If let's say, like what Arvind's saying, if you want to kind of compete with your own models, you require a lot of funds. I don't think we have any. There is no lack in terms of talent and brain power and expertise. More than enough in this ecosystem. I've been part of both ecosystems in the US and here. I'd say that there is not much difference in terms of motivation and talent. Right?
Hmm.
We have everything that we need. Uh, what we perhaps lack is a bit of capital, right? And we have a lot of other high priority problems to solve. So, in my personal opinion, I don't think we should be entering into this whole LLM race. But having said that, there's already people building it. There's something called as Bharat GPT. A
Yeah.
pretty well renowned founder is trying to build that out. So there is work going on for those who are interested in that ecosystem. Also, we are a little bit, I wouldn't say behind, but we have other, practical issues that we have to address, right? Capital, for example, would perhaps be far well suited. So there are very interesting problems in India. For example, um, not interesting, but I'd say unfortunate. Some of these problems exist, but they are there, right? So uh, you have, like, say, kids who are not receiving vaccination, right? Who are underdeveloped and malnourished and so on, right? So there's an organization. It's a for profit or not for profit company. I'm not very sure. It's called as Vadvani AI, who builds basically these AI systems. From a photo, it can detect, is this kid malnourished or not, right? And does it require more nutrition, things like that, right? So there are some great solutions being built for India. I feel we can make much more impact in our country, and we can scale our own GDPs that way. But yeah, again, personal opinion.
Yes, yes, Abhinav. As you rightly said, that we should not go for the global race for the LLM, based on the statement from Perplexity, who themselves are not into that race. They
Correct.
are also
Very true.
out of that race.
It
And
benefits them that more people are in the race.
yeah, so maybe
Right.
that's the intent there. So, but the question again on the models, as you
Yeah.
say, I could see one of your posts, like you were discussing about the AI models, how they struggle to meet the business needs and the
Hmm.
consumer needs. And do you still believe that the situation is the same, or has it improved now?
So I think very dependent on use case to use case. What's, I think, largely changed right now with the whole LLM wave is that prior to this, for every use case or problem we were looking at, there had to be a separate model which had to be trained. Right now, these LLMs, what they've done is they're sort of polycontextual in the sense that they've been trained on a language problem to predict what's the next best word. That's how they
Mm-hmm.
work, right? Yet they're able to solve a lot of other problems as well. That's where I think there's been a big change. Now, the question that you are asking is about how effective. Essentially, it boils down to how effective is that, right? It's certainly improving. There are a lot of use cases where, especially with now the world of AI agents coming in, where you have the ability for one LLM to cross check with another LLM, two forces acting against each other,
Mm-hmm.
talking to different app ecosystems, essentially, right? So they're becoming more and more powerful, solving a lot of business use cases. But yet, I would say it's the tip of the iceberg. We're still just at the start. There's a lot more to be done, but it's far improved, I'd say, from I don't know when was that post, but far improved, I'd say, from, let's say, a year ago. I see a lot of difference in terms of how this is moving forward.
Okay. So where do you see it going, like in the next 1 or 2 years? Do you see
Very,
anything?
I think, very, very tough to say. A year ago, if you were to ask me, would we see something like AI agents coming in? Um, I don't know. So maybe a little bit of information on the back. So something that we were building for our learners was this automated interview bot, which would
Mm-hmm.
basically kind of it's an AI interviewing you specifically in the field of machine learning, the way that questions are asked in machine learning interviews. And so that's still in beta. We're still working on it, right? But what we
Mm-hmm.
had done in the backend was we basically had one AI which was sending out the questions, right? And the student would then answer. And there's another AI which was analyzing it. right? So there were three, four parts of that analytics AI. So one would analyze the body language of the person, right? One would analyze the eye contact. One would analyze the verbal, the speech, which is there, what's the confidence of the speech. One would analyze then the actual content of the question, right? So in some sense, we were already trying some of these things earlier, but now there's a name called as agents to that, right? And there is more and more being built on top of that. So I never imagined that somebody will say, I will enforce a protocol on top of this, like MCP, right? Now there's another one that
Yeah.
Google's come up with, saying that there's another protocol, A2A or
Yeah,
something.
agent to agent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. So there's, it's moving so fast that I think there's a lot of people who would be trying things, and and then there's those people who say, okay, now we formalize it. So it's kind of building one on top of the other. It's very tough even for me to tell how 1 to 2 years down the line things are going to look at. I know this much, that anybody who thinks that their job is not going to get affected, or their current workflow of doing things is not going to affect it, I think they are just naive. That is
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody sitting in the blind, they're, it's there's they're going to be caught for a bad surprise. It's going to be a bad surprise for
Yeah.
them. Uh,
Yeah.
Better get onto the wave, ride the wave, rather than just sit back. Yeah,
Hmm.
very
So,
tough to extrapolate.
so,
Yeah,
so with the influx of information coming in, or the new things getting launched every day in the AI space, so how to stay relevant? Uh, how do
right.
you keep yourself relevant? Uh,
Yeah, I think this is a challenge for everybody who's in the space, as well as those who are just looking to learn about the space, right? So I'd say that one of the filters I personally use is looking at research papers of these top conferences. So maybe it's because of my research background, but that's how I prefer to look at it. Looking at these research papers of top conferences, sorting them by citation, so I know whose work most people are citing and building upon, right? So that gives me some context as to what are the interesting things going on in this space. So I think reading that paper and having the ability to read those papers, because they can be quite mathematical, and they can be challenging to read sometimes, right? But building that skill set has personally for me been very helpful. Anybody else looking at kind of staying relevant in that space, I'd say that's highly
mhm.
recommended. Um, so that's one. Apart from that, I think that's the main toolkit that I tend to use.
Yeah.
There's just way too many solutions coming out there, and sometimes you don't know what is all relevant. Like 10 things are building in 10 different directions. So in certain instances, it's just good to also wait it out, right?
Okay.
As it's always good to wait it out and see who comes out on top, and then learns, and you can just learn what that is. So if that's a 6 month period, you can just learn some basic infrastructure from one possibility, so you're aware of that one possibility, and then just you can wait it out to see who wins the race in terms of innovation and technique or whatever it is, and then perhaps pick it up, because it's moving too fast. Like every day there's like hundreds of thousands of publications, products, right? Every company
Yeah.
is pushing something new, news articles, and you're
Correct.
constantly in FOMO. You're just
Hmm.
Yeah.
constantly worried, have I missed something out, right? And for me, if I'm being in the education space, I have to constantly evaluate what is still relevant for people to learn, right?
Definitely.
So another great way which you can look at it is if you're having collaborations with the industry, so they will also have insight on what they want to put money on to build
Mm-hmm.
out and optimize on, right? So if you're able to get that level of insight also, it will be great, right? I think like you guys are having some partnerships with companies as you try to build AI solutions for them. So that's also another, I think, really good way, because you know where the money is going. Is somebody looking at building RAG agents more, right? What are they kind of looking at in terms of solutions? Maybe their solution is wrong, right? Maybe they don't understand it, but all the same, having the fact that they want to put money on it, that okay, maybe there is something interesting there that we should just, if we are not aware of it, pick up on. So I'd say yeah, these couple of things. But apart from that, yeah, Google GPT models
Mm-hmm.
are getting updated every 6 months to a year, so keep asking it what's relevant, what's new, what's interesting. So probably it does some interesting indexing for you.
So, three major areas then to keep yourself relevant. One is the research,
Yeah,
going through the research papers. Another is to ask the GPT or role models what is the latest news and all. And third, you mentioned about the money, where the money is being
yeah,
invested.
correct.
Fine. So, as you mentioned about the research, just wanted to understand from you, like with the rise of these large language models and the generative AI, do you think we are losing touch in the traditional research culture which we had earlier. Uh, is that so?
So by traditional research culture, what do you mean? And what do you mean by the new method of?
Like in the machine learning, in the deep learning, when the way we do the research,
Okay.
yeah.
Mhm. So probably I think I will extend your question to saying research and development. So I think
Hmm.
traditionally there would be people who are machine learning engineers or applied scientists who would actually build those models foundationally. So that is one, and then now you're seeing a lot of people who are fine tuning these models, who are just using external APIs to access hosted models, right, on cloud systems and just build on top of that, right? So I think both these two ecosystems are very relevant. And if you think about it, so I come from the traditional line, right? A
Hmm.
lot of my work experience comes from that traditional line, whether it's in the industry or academia. Now, for the longest time, I felt that is the best way to do things, right? But as we started talking to more companies and more people, it naturally, it's probably a resistance that was my own mental block because of how I was doing things. Uh, that you know people will always choose the most effective easy way to a solution, right?
Hmm.
Why will somebody go the harder way unless they have the time resources to ensure it is worthwhile, right? So anybody who is a business, let's say, they have to go and answer back to their board, they have to go and answer back to their investors, they have to answer back to their employees, right? If not, what happens is layoffs, right, and company shutting down and things like that. So everybody is
Yeah.
answerable to somebody, so automatically there'll be a process optimization which takes place. Now if you're doing that, then what is going to give you the fastest result, people are going to move towards that. So it's natural that a lot of API based work, a lot of building of tools and tooling and things like that will continue to run. The way I see it, it's breaking down into two large areas. There is a
Hmm.
lot of large companies who have capital, who are working on, who still continue to work on core problems, right? The
Hmm.
Googles, the Amazons, Meta, they're all having large teams because for their own ecosystem. So Meta, for example, is in one of their largest revenue sources is in advertising, and
Hmm.
the way they generate money in advertising is because of how many users they have and also how efficient their matching ecosystem is, which is basically an ML algorithm at the back end, right? So they
Yeah.
would want to optimize that more and more and more. So these kinds of companies or somebody who's working on autonomous driving, right? So they will continue to build foundational models. So there will continue to be a need for machine learning engineers because there are thousands of other problems which are not yet solved, right?
Hmm.
Or which are
Hmm.
solved in academia, but in a very limited sense. Now, productionizing that and making it a generic solution is a very different ball game altogether, right? So kind of considering that, so that ecosystem will continue to exist, still relevant.
Hmm.
What we see a lot more on is probably the API based stuff, and I think they go hand in hand. It's very important that this also gets built out, and I don't think it's a loss for any party. I think it's better for the world, right? The
Yeah.
people who don't have as much access to capital and people, they will use a lot of these tools, which is fantastic for innovation. A small startup like us, who has a very limited team, we will
Yeah.
love to use these tools because they cost very less and we can still innovate and prove ourselves, get funds, continue to scale. We can compete with the big people there, so which is great.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, it kind of dividing these two ecosystems, highly dependent on your capital, time requirements, a lot of these things, right? But fundamentally, I'd say that building your model from scratch, or basically not from scratch, but building your model the traditional way is will at the end of the day be more effective. Um,
Hmm.
Probably again a blanket statement, but it in large number of cases is quite more effective than using an off the shelf, anything off the shelf. But not everybody has the time, resources, and so on for off the shelf. And off the shelf stuff, they get you 90-95% of the way. So great to test your hypothesis and move on from there. So yeah, both ways kind of will continue to exist, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. So we talked a lot about the AI models and the technical stuff here. Just turning back to 1 2 3 of AI. So we would love to hear about the Q&A labs, which is a part of 1 2 3 of AI. So what it is and who is it for? Can you
Got
just
it.
explain us?
Sure, sure. So Q&A Lab was basically, it's more curated towards machine learning and AI interviews. So anybody who's
Hmm.
looking at cracking these interviews, what we have done is basically we've gone out and talked to a lot of companies, figured out for people who want to be machine learning engineers, data scientists, right, AI engineers, what is it that people in the industry are currently looking at? What are the kinds of questions they're asking, right? What are the kinds of case studies which are being asked? What's the kind of intuition they're expecting out of people? And basis our understanding, we have then talked to a lot of candidates and companies and so on, and built sort of this ecosystem of questions in a very structured pathway, so people can kind of prepare for the interviews in as fast a time as possible. Now, this is far more than just a repository of questions, because the fundamental thesis of our company also flows on into this product, where increasingly we will move more and more towards a lot of tools which are very effective for learning and which are curiosity driven, right? So something that is already there on our platform, it's in its nascent stages right now, which is things like flashcards, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, a great learning tool. A lot of people use flashcards.
Yeah.
There's enough research talking about scientific methods of improving memory with flashcards, right? It has like active recall, spaced repetitions, proper ways of learning, right? So that's a fantastic learning tool in there. Increasingly, we are also adding an AI agent on top of our platform, which will, look at the user behavior and try to analyze what are the things that the person is currently working on, what are the things they solved in the past, and allow them to stay consistent, stay motivated, right, and continue to refine their concepts. So for example,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody solved a question 3 weeks ago, it might pop up, our assistant will, for example, pop up a question on a related topic, right? Or if somebody's gotten certain questions wrong a month back, then if they've come back onto the platform again, it'll open up a quiz saying, hey, you know what, you got this wrong the last time, try it out, right? So those are things that we are currently building, but
Mm-hmm.
largely it is for machine learning AI interview prep, but it's going to be in our own style, our own flavor, which is curiosity driven, effective, and hopefully it helps people in far better problem solving.
Hmm.
Right.
So, Abhinav, tell me how Q&A Labs is a different concept from those of the traditional learning platforms. And can you please state certain learning experiences that you have implemented into Q&A Labs apart from the flashcards? So, whoever who's watching this bit or whoever watching this podcast can get a broader aspect of what can they find in Q&A Labs when they enter it.
Sure. So I think there are, I'd say, 3 to 4 aspects of what we continuously am calling as curiosity-driven effective learning, right? So
Yeah.
one of them is superior retention. Flashcards takes care of that, right? So that is
Mm-hmm.
integrated to that system. Another is personalized pathway, right? So what we're looking at eventually doing, like I mentioned much earlier, was personalization at scale. So what we have is basically we are built a proficiency test where you would answer a bunch of questions across an hour across various different topics, and we assess your current skill radar, right? Where do you stand on each of these topics? Number one. Number two is we add into that context what is the what's your dream role? What do you want to go? What is the timeline in which what you want to achieve this? Right? There are more things that you're working on to kind of refine this. So basis these parameters, we generate a completely personalized pathway just for them to reach their goals. So for example, somebody might want to prepare for their interviews in 2 weeks. They might be really really strong in mathematics and Python. They don't want to touch that at all, but they want to know the latest of the latest, right? The
Hmm.
pathway will automatically do that for them, right? Somebody else, they have 6 months, they have no background in anything, they want to completely learn for scratch, the pathway will do that for them, right? So that personalization which is coming in through the pathway and the proficiency test that we have structured. So that is the second aspect of the platform. We're trying to personalize it. So this is where also the what we call as our curiosity assistant will come in. So this is the curiosity assistant is not yet launched. It's something that we are still working on, where it will tie in several of these components, right? It will tie in and try to prompt the user. Automatically this assistant will sit on the platform, and if the user has not come back for a week, if the user is, for example, broken that, so we have a gamification features also on the platform. So we have taken inspiration from Duolingo and implemented a similar sort of a leaderboard which resets every week, right? So you can kind of compete there. Contests are something that we're looking at implementing. Currently we have questions of the day, right? So the curiosity assistant will look at all these different elements, the gamification, the personalization, look at all of these, look where you currently stand, and try to kind of keep you motivated, keep you far more engaged. So it will do things like, if you have broken your streak, it will maybe send you an email saying that, hey, you know what, you've broken your streak. If somebody's replaced you on the leaderboard, it will send you a message saying that, hey, somebody's replaced you on the leaderboard, come back onto the platform, solve this question. right? And we're trying to tailor this for busy professionals. So that's why the personalization, a part of the personalization is ensuring that the target timelines are hit, right? So if somebody wants to achieve this in 1 month, we tell them that, okay, 1 month. If it's a realistic timeline, we say, hey, you can do this in 1 month. Here's a pathway for that for you, right? If it's not a realistic timeline, we tell them, what you're looking at doing is probably going to take a month and a half. We still prioritize and give you what you want in the initial month to give you maximum bang for your buck. But for the remaining time, you also have these additional concepts to learn, right? So we're kind of building all these several tools into this platform that will allow people to very effectively interview. Our eventual goal is to get our courses also onto this, so that anybody who runs in our cohort basis on our courses also can take advantage of several of these things, right? So you want flashcards popping up all of a sudden, you want random quizzes coming up, right? And you want to have personalization at scale. So that's the grand vision, try to get this personalization at scale happening. But this is currently where we are at. So you will find some of these elements in the platform. We're trying to tightly tie them together, and I hope that in this quarter we're able to kind of get it completely ready for people to see.
Definitely we'll be able to get it. So lastly, as we are at the end of our podcast, so I want you to leave our viewers with some words of motivation, like for those who are just starting, who are at the beginning stages of their AI journey, and for those as well who are working in this space already.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty tough to kind of say something generic, but one common sort of trend that I've seen is, and this is something I've personally experienced, which is that we kind of, it's very overwhelming seeing everything that's happening,
Mhm.
right? And that's something that I also constantly struggle with. And I think that is when, if we can put things into perspective by realigning and seeing which of this is actually important, because there's going to be hype made about every single thing. So sometimes even waiting out, playing the patient game kind of works. And so that's one part, which is try to find maybe an ecosystem where you have similar people who are feeling similar things, and try to see how they are kind of addressing that. So addressing the overwhelm, I think, is a critical part of the kind of change and transformation which is taking place. Probably the second thing is that I don't think we're at a stage where nobody should take AI for granted, probably. So everybody should
Yeah.
should get the relevant skill set relevant to whatever their industry and their domain. So not everybody has to become an engineer, somebody building models. What is relevant for them? If you're a product manager, you don't need to necessarily build systems, but it's pretty good to know what are the fallacies that you might encounter. So issues that are there in the data, for example. Only if you have built a system, perhaps you'll be able to add that to your pathway and really account for that. No matter if you're the product manager is talking to engineers, AI engineers, the importance of the data, for example, he or she will be able to understand only if they are build things around themselves. So whatever is the relevant upskilling for your problem or your domain or your role, I think you should do that, and you should do that pretty
Mhm.
fast, so that you kind of stay ahead of the curve. Yeah, I think these are sort of the top two things I can think of. Read a lot of books, because there's a lot of great material coming out from people. So maybe I can maybe leave you with some stuff from some of the people I follow. So
Yeah.
Sure.
people, for example, Chip Hewen. She writes a lot of content on her. She has a personal website. She studied from Stanford, and I think she's a professor as well as Stanford. Runs her own company right now, and is largely very experienced in industry collaborations, working with companies, implementing stuff. Very well renowned person in the field. So we can follow her. So the way she kind of works is that she has she writes stuff up as and when she finds it's interesting and relevant on her blog, and eventually compiles her blog into a book and edits the relevant sections and publishes the book, right? So you can follow her blog. It's very, very good. Another couple of people who write some great content in the space. If you're looking for technical stuff, there's this guy called as Aman. I don't recall his full name, but I think aman.ai is his website. So I think
Mhm.
again a Substack, probably like a blog newsletter sort of a thing. Pretty fun to follow, because his visualizations and the way in which he graphically depicts a lot of stuff is really nice. So it will give you a different level understanding of the concepts, right? So yeah, these are kind of like a couple of people I commonly keep getting emails from, and keep it's sort of I keep tracking. I'm sure there are a few more, but I think top of my mind, yeah, follow some of these people, so it'll help. So they themselves will be sorting out a lot of content and a lot of things, right, to understand and stay relevant. So follow them, and you can follow us as well.
Yes.
Definitely, definitely. So I think this was actually a very insightful conversation that we have had here. Thank you so much, Abhinav, for being on the show. And honestly, we have learned a lot from this conversation. This was the very first time when I found some, core research guy talking so interestingly and simplifying concepts like that. So this was such an amazing conversation and such an amazing experience for both of us. I hope our viewers will also enjoy this conversation, and surely they'll take many moments from this conversation as well. So thank you so much for being on the AI Bro show, and I hopefully see you uh, having conversation with us ahead in the near podcast as well in the future. And I wish you all the best for Q&A labs of by 123 of AI. I am pretty sure that people are going to love the platform, and people are going to learn a lot about machine learning and AI, and they're going to enjoy their journey through. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, you're
Thank you, Avinam.
glad to be here, and it was lovely talking to both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here.